welcome back everyone. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about books. I'm going to be giving you my top 5 favorite ones. These span all genres. I'm an avid reader. I love to read historical fiction, nonfiction, everything. It's a smorgasbord of books. So these books are the books that I give to people when they tell me that they don't like to read. I'm like, well, have you tried this book? So hopefully you will give 1 or 2 of these a shot and let me know if you liked them. I'm going to start with my favorite book first, and that one is called Geek Love. Geek Love was written in 1989 by Katherine Dunn, and it is quite possibly one of the most well-written books I've ever read. It's one of those books that I was hooked within the first chapter, and when I got done, I was like, where am I? What happened? Like, it's that immersive. It is amazing. The basic premise of this one is there's a traveling carnival, and it's owned by Al Banuski and his wife, Crystal Lil, and they hire freaks, and they go across the country showcasing their freaks and their talents. Eventually, they run into hard times. They're finding it more difficult to keep the talent, so they come up with a plan. And their plan is they are going to breed their own freaks. So Al decides to drug his wife with various radioactive materials and psychotropic drugs in his quest to breed freaks. And he does, and these freaks become a part of the traveling carnival. This synopsis only scratches the surface of this book, but I don't want to give anything away. It is a magical novel, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to read this book and you're going to be like, oh my god, this was the best book I ever read. And then you're going to want to go out and you're going to want to buy every single book this woman ever wrote. Don't you do it. Do not do it. None of her other books are like this. It's like she got some sort of nugget from the Lord to write this book, and then it was never replicated again. So definitely recommend this book. Do not recommend any of her other books, but I really do hope you'll give this one a shot. I read this book once a year. I love it so much. The next one I'm going to tell you about is definitely a departure from Geek Love. It is called Pimp. And it came out in 1967, and it's by Iceberg Slim, who was an actual real pimp. And this is an autobiography of his life told in story form, and it is amazing. If you ever want to know what pimping was like in the 50s, this is your quintessential guide. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. Got a lot of sex in it, a lot of drugs, a lot of pimping, but it's so fascinating and it's so raw. I really think that if you are any type of a history buff, especially if you like vintage and like old-timey days, people are always like, oh, I wish that I could live in the 50s. Girl, you better read this book. It is not all Leave It to Beaver. The next book I'm going to tell you about is by one of my favorite authors, and her name is Octavia Butler, and the book is Kindred. Octavia Butler is an amazing writer. There has never been a book that she has written that I did not love. She's actually a very prolific science fiction writer, and I guess you could call this sort of science fiction. It's sort of a blend of science fiction and historical fiction. The premise of this one is there's a woman in the 1970s who's married to a white man, and they are moving into this new house. As they're moving into this new house, suddenly she is sucked back into pre-Civil War times. While she's there, she meets her ancestors, and one of them is a rich white plantation owner, and the other one is a free woman who was actually forced into slavery and into being a concubine by this plantation owner. Now, throughout this book, she goes from the present to the past. There's so much emotion that's evoked. It's so well written that you feel like you're there. I recommend this book to anyone who's looking for a good read, but who's also interested in historical fiction. This is a really great book. It's very immersive. You really feel for the main characters in this story, and you almost don't know who to root for. It's such a great book, and I really do think that you'd enjoy it. The next book I'm going to tell you about is actually a biography And it's about one of my favorite musicians. I have a lot, but this one's close to my heart. It's Bob Wills. And this one's called San Antonio Rose, The Life and Music of Bob Wills. Bob Wills is basically the king of Western swing. I am a huge fan of Western swing, and Bob Wills is it. It's amazing the journey this guy took from being, a 16-year-old running away on a freight train to turning into a guy that sold out shows and became synonymous with Western swing. That's a huge accomplishment. And Charles R. Townsend, who wrote this biography, really did the work. He interviewed over 200 people, including Bob Wills, listened to every known recording. This is as thorough a book about a musician that I love that I've ever read. Of course, there might be better ones, and if you know of one, definitely leave a comment and let me know. But this is really, really interesting. Even if you're not interested in Western swing, this guy's life story is freaking amazing, and I think you would do well to check it out. Learn a little something new about Bob Wills. The last one I'm going to leave you with is called Futureland, and it came out in 2002, and the author is Walter Mosley. You might know Walter Mosley from his noir books. His most famous is Devil in a Blue Dress, but he also writes science fiction. And this book is actually a collection of short stories. It's sort of an introduction into the type of sci-fi writer that Walter Mosley is. So if you like this, then you'll definitely like his subsequent novels. I'll give you a synopsis of my two favorite stories in this book. The first one is called Whispers in the Dark. This is about a young genius who's got the highest IQ that the world has ever seen, and his caretakers are poor, so they sell off their organs to get him an education. This education may or may not have gone awry, where he completes a science experiment that may land him in prison. So there's that one. And the other one is called Little Brother, and it's basically about a man in a completely automated court, and he must defend himself against a charge of murder in front of a bunch of robots who only care about, dots, dashes, and numbers. So it's really interesting. I really like it. It's definitely an acquired taste. It's definitely not the normal science fiction type of book you may be used to, but I definitely think that it's worth a read. And that's it, guys. We're done. As always, if you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe. And hopefully I'll see you next time.